You've gotta love the sound of a good engine, don't you, Mandy? Agios shouted over the roar of his highly tuned Duesenberg as he parked and then killed the ignition. Mandy, his secretary, rolled her eyes before exiting the vehicle to follow him into the cramped office of AG Investigations located in the heart of Samhein's factory district. She was used to his love for classic cars, but today she had more important things on her mind than the purr of a finely crafted motor. Seeing to the mailbox while Agios ducked back to the garage to do some car quick maintenance, the details of which she never paid any heed to Mandy's. Curiosity piqued when she saw a large letter stamped by the local government's own seal. Opening it hurriedly, she could hardly believe the details of the substantial file within.
Boss, we've got a new case," she called out.
Agios sailed through the door. The smell of gasoline and leather trailing him, his sharp eyes scanned the room, taking in the mountain of paperwork from their last case. With a sigh, he tossed his keys onto the desk and leaned back into a chair.
"What's the scoop, doll?"
Mandy slid a file across the desk, her crimson lips curling into a smirk. "It's Juicy, the mayor's daughter, Lila, has gone missing. And it seems she's been hanging out with some real peculiar folks." Agios leaned forward, his interest piqued. "Peculiar? How?" "Well, they're not exactly the mayor's usual social circle," Mandy replied, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "More like a cult of some sort. They worship this thing called Nyralothep, supposedly. They're trying to summon it during the upcoming harvest festival." Agios raised an eyebrow, his curiosity now in full gear. "Nyralothep, you say? Sounds like a fancy cheese." He opened the file and began to read through the pages, his eyes scanning over the reports of strange rituals and whispers of dark magic that had been plaguing the town lately. The office was quiet except for the distant hum of the factories outside. The setting sun cast an eerie glow through the dusty windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Mandy sat on the edge of her chair, her gaze fixed on Agios as he processed the information. "Looks like we've got ourselves a job," he said finally, snapping the file shut. "Let's pay a visit to Mayor Castellanos."
They drove through the cobblestone streets of Samhein, the buildings closing in around them like the pages of an ancient tome. The town was a mismatch of Gothic and industrial architecture, a testament to its storied past and burgeoning modernity. The festival decorations, which should have brought cheer, instead hung like a macabre shroud over the town, their colors faded and tattered. Mayor Castellanos' mansion was a stark contrast to the surrounding buildings. It was a gleaming bastion of opulence, surrounded by an impeccably manicured lawn that looked almost untouched by the encroaching shadows of the factory district. Agios parked his heavily modified Duesenberg at the curb, and they both stepped out, the crunch of their shoes on gravel echoing in the stillness. The mayor, a portly man with a well-groomed mustache and beads of sweat on his forehead, greeted them at the door with a look that was a blend of relief and desperation. His eyes darted from Agios to Mandy and back again, as if trying to gauge their ability to handle the gravity of the situation. "Thank you for coming so quickly," he said, his voice trembling. "Please, come in." The inside of the mansion was a stark contrast to the dilapidated exteriors of the factory district. The walls were adorned with tapestries that whispered of dark secrets in a language that seemed to resonate in the very air. A grand staircase curved upwards like the neck of some great beast, and the chandeliers above them threw flickering shadows across the gleaming floorboards. Mayor Castellanos led them into a study that smelled of aged leather and pipe tobacco. A large oak desk dominated the room, littered with documents and a half-empty bottle of whiskey. The mayor offered them a drink, his hands shaking as he poured. "Tell me everything you know, Mayor," Agios said, taking a seat in a plush chair opposite the desk, slightly amused at the total disregard for prohibition. His host was displaying Mandy perched on the arm, her eyes darting around the room, absorbing every detail. The mayor took a deep breath. His hands clutching a tumbler of amber liquid. "Lila," he began, "has always been a rebellious spirit. But this is beyond anything I could have ever imagined. She started attending these meetings in an old abandoned warehouse down by the river. I tried to put a stop to it, but she's stubborn." He took a swig of whiskey, his knuckles turning white around the glass, and then she just disappeared. Agios leaned forward, the gravity of the situation settling in. "Do you have any leads?" The mayor's shoulders slumped. "Only that some of the town's youth have been seen entering that warehouse at odd hours. They're all under the influence of this cult leader, a man named Thaddeus Crow. He's got them all convinced that summoning Nyralothep will bring them power, wealth, and eternal life." Agios nodded thoughtfully. "Sounds like a classic con with a supernatural twist. Have you tried talking to any of the kids?" "They're not themselves," Castellanos replied, his eyes haunted. "Their eyes are vacant, like they're under some kind of spell." Mandy leaned in, her curiosity turning to concern. "We'll need to get into that warehouse," she said, her voice low and determined. "We need to know what they're planning and how far they've gotten with this ritual." Agios nodded. "Agreed. We'll start with the usual suspects. The local speakeasy. Maybe we'll catch wind of their next meeting."
The speakeasy, the hidden moan, was tucked away in a back alley, its neon sign flickering erratically. They entered through the secret door behind a dusty bookshelf, the scent of illicit alcohol and cigarette smoke hitting them like a wall. The jazz band played a mournful tune, and the patrons, a mix of factory workers and flappers, barely glanced up from their drinks. They found a booth in the corner, and Agios signaled the barkeep, a burly man with a nose that had seen one too many fists. "2 whiskeys," he said, his eyes scanning the room. The bartender nodded, sliding the drinks over with a knowing look. Mandy leaned in close, her voice a hushed whisper. "We need to find someone who knows about this Crow character." Agios took a sip of his whiskey, the burn in his throat reminding him of the urgency of their task. "I've got an idea," he said, his eyes lighting up with a plan. He gestured to the bartender, who sauntered over, a hint of suspicion in his step. "We're looking for someone who knows the lowdown on Thaddeus Crow," Agios said, his tone casual yet firm. The bartender's gaze sharpened. "Crow," he muttered. "Why do you want to know about him?" Agios slid a crisp bill across the table, his eyes never leaving the man's face. "Let's just say it's a matter of personal interest. You know anything?" The bartender picked up the bill, his eyes flicking over it before tucking it into his apron. "I might have heard a thing or two," he said, leaning closer. "He's got some of the local youth in his thrall, promises them the world, and all they gotta do is spill a little blood, whisper a few ancient words." He leaned in further, his voice dropping to a whisper. "They say he's got away with the ladies, too charming. But there's something off about him." Agios nodded, his mind racing. Where can we find this crow? The bartender leaned back, his eyes narrowing. You ain't the first to ask, but I'll tell you what I know for that Benjamin Franklin crow's got a place, a sort of clubhouse for his little group of followers. It's in the old textile mill, 2 streets down by the river. They downed their whiskeys and left a generous tip. As they stepped out into the cool night air, the sound of the jazz band's wailing trumpet followed them like a mournful ghost. The cobblestone streets were slick with rain, the neon lights of the speakeasy reflecting in the puddles. Mandy shivered, pulling her fur-lined coat tight around her. The textile mill, huh? She murmured, her voice barely audible over the distant hum of the factories. Agios nodded, his eyes scanning the shadows. We're getting closer. Let's pay this crow a visit and see what he's up to. They approached the old mill, the rush of the river acting as a mournful soundtrack to their investigation. The building was a looming specter against the night sky, its windows shattered and the door hanging precariously on its hinges. Agios pulled out a flashlight, casting a narrow beam of light into the abyss. Stay sharp, he murmured to Mandy, his voice tinged with caution. The mill's interior was a maze of dust-covered machinery, the air thick with the scent of decay and something else. An acrid smell that made the hair on the back of Agios' neck stand on end. They moved through the darkness, their footsteps echoing through the vast, empty space. Mandy clutched a small knife she had concealed in her garter, her heart pounding in her chest. The walls of the mill were adorned with bizarre symbols, painted in what looked like a mixture of blood and chalk. They followed a trail of these cryptic markings to a staircase that descended into the bowels of the building. The steps creaked under their weight, each one feeling like a countdown to some unspeakable revelation. The bottom of the stairs, they found themselves in a cavernous room. The air grew colder, and the faint light from Agios' flashlight danced across a series of makeshift altars, each one adorned with candles and various artifacts that seemed to have been stolen from the town's museum. The centerpiece was a large stone table, stained with what was unmistakably dried blood. Mandy swallowed hard, trying to keep her composure as they moved deeper into the space. The walls were covered in arcane symbols that seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, as if the very fabric of reality was stretching thin. To allow the unspeakable to seep through, they heard murmurs in the distance, a chant in a language that seemed to twist and contort in their ears, causing a nauseating sensation. Agios held up a hand, signaling for Mandy to stay put, and cautiously approached the edge of the room. Peering around the corner, he saw a group of young townsfolk all dressed in black robes, their faces painted with the same symbols they had seen outside. Thaddeus Crow stood at the center, his eyes closed in concentration as he recited from a tome that looked as if it predated the town itself. Mandy's hand tightened around the knife handle as she recognized some of the kids from the mayor's description. Among them was Lila Castellanos, the mayor's daughter. She looked pale and lifeless, a stark contrast to the vibrant girl in the photos in the file. Agios took a step back, his jaw set firmly. "We got to get her out of here," he murmured, and stop whatever sick ritual they're planning. Mandy nodded, her eyes gleaming with determination. "We should split up," she suggested. "You take the main room, I'll check the back for any other exits or clues. We can't let them know we're on to them." Agios agreed, and they split up, moving as silently as shadows in the moonlit gloom.
As Mandy made her way through the labyrinth of machines and looms, she heard the chanting grow louder. It was a cacophony of syllables that seemed to claw at her very soul, urging her to either flee or join. She clenched her teeth and pushed onward, her heels clicking rhythmically against the cold stone floor. Rounding a corner, she found another set of stairs that descended even further into the earth. The air thick with a sense of foreboding, she paused, listening, and heard the murmur of a river below. The sound grew louder, and she realized it wasn't just water. It was the whisper of 100 voices, an inhuman chorus that made her blood run cold. Moving swiftly, but silently, Mandy descended the stairs. Her heart racing. At the bottom, she found a chamber that had been carved from the very bedrock beneath the mill. The walls were lined with ancient symbols, the air thick with incense and the scent of something foul. In the center of the room was a large, ornate circle, drawn in what looked like fresh blood, with a series of candles placed at equidistant points around it. Her eyes widened as she took in the sight before her. The voices grew louder, and she realized that they were coming from a gaping hole in the center of the chamber. A portal to some otherworldly realm.
The sight was so unnerving that she had to stifle a scream, her hand flying to her mouth. The chanting grew more intense, and the air around the circle began to shimmer and distort. Mandy knew she had to act fast. She retreated up the stairs, her mind racing with what she had just witnessed. She found Agios, who was observing the group from another hidden vantage point. "Boss," she hissed, "we've got a real problem." Agios nodded curtly, his expression grim. "I heard it," he murmured. "They're summoning Nyralothep. We've got to stop them." They exchanged a look that conveyed a silent understanding. This was no ordinary rescue mission. They were about to confront a force that defied the very fabric of reality. Mandy took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves as she slipped the knife back into her garter. "How do we do that?" she whispered. Agios's eyes narrowed as he thought through their options. "We disrupt the ritual. Whatever they're doing to keep that thing at bay, we need to mess it up, and we need to get Lila out before it's too late." They approached the main room, their footsteps silent on the dusty floor. The cultists were in a frenzy now, their voices rising in a crescendo of madness. Lila lay unconscious on the stone table, a ceremonial knife glinting in Crow's hand. Agios's pulse quickened. They had to move now. He signaled to Mandy, and she nodded, her eyes steely with resolve. As one, they burst into the room. Agios's flashlight beam slicing through the gloom like a blade. The chanting stuttered, and the robed figures turned to face the intrusion, their expressions a mix of anger and fear. Crow's eyes widened, the incantation dying on his lips as he took in Agios's determined stance and Mandy's fiery gaze. He barked a command, and several of the cultists rushed forward, their eyes glazed over with an unnatural fervor. Agios met them with a series of swift punches and kicks, his years of stunt work serving him well in this unexpected combat. Mandy dashed to the stone table where Lila lay, her heart racing. She had to get her out before the ritual could proceed any further. As she reached for the girl, a strong hand gripped her arm. She spun around, only to find herself staring into the vacant eyes of a young man she recognized from the speakeasy. He was one of the mayor's constituents, his mind now a puppet to Crow's dark arts.
With a snarl, he lunged at her. His movements jerky and unnatural, Mandy twisted free, her instincts taking over. She slammed the heel of her hand into his nose, the sickening crunch echoing through the room. He stumbled back, momentarily dazed, giving her enough time to scoop Lila into her arms. The girl was light as a feather, and Mandy could feel the unnatural cold emanating from her. Agios had his own share of trouble, fending off the other cultists with a mix of his fists and the flashlight, which he used to disorient and blind them. The air grew colder, the chanting grew louder, and the symbols on the walls began to pulse with an eerie light. They had to move fast. Mandy, with Lila in her arms, searched for a way out. The room was spinning, the candlelight playing tricks on her eyes. The cultists were closing in, their movement erratic and driven by something otherworldly. She stumbled upon a hidden panel, barely noticing the warmth seeping from it. With a prayer to whatever deities might be listening, she pushed it open.
The panel led to a narrow, damp tunnel that smelled faintly of river water. She didn't hesitate, ducking into the passage with Lila clutched to her chest. The chanting grew fainter behind her, the sounds of the struggle between Agios and the cultists muffled by the earth and stone. Her heart hammered in her chest, and her breath came in ragged gasps as she stumbled through the darkness. The walls closed in around her, the air thick and oppressive. The only sound was the slap of her heels on the wet ground and the occasional drip of water echoing through the narrow space. She knew she didn't have much time. The ritual was reaching its climax, and she could feel the very fabric of reality stretching to its breaking point. The tunnel grew narrower, and Mandy had to crouch to avoid hitting her head on the low ceiling. The warmth she had felt earlier grew more intense, and she realized it was coming from Lila. The girl's body was cold, but there was a pulsing warmth at her core that grew stronger with each step closer to the heart of the ritual. Mandy's arms trembled with the effort of carrying her, but she pushed on, driven by a fierce determination to save her. The chanting grew so loud it was almost a physical presence, and she could feel the ground shaking beneath her. The air was thick with power, a palpable force that seemed to push against her, trying to keep her from her goal. Finally, she saw a glimmer of light up ahead. The tunnel opened into a chamber, and she could see the cultists through the haze, their shadows. Flickering and dancing on the walls, they were close to completing the summoning. Mandy took a deep breath, steeling herself for what she had to do. Agios was holding his own, but she knew he couldn't keep it up for much longer. The flashlight in his hand had become a blur of motion as he struck and dodged, his fist connecting with sickening thumps against the robed figures. He caught sight of her and Lila, his eyes widening in surprise and relief. Mandy tightened her grip on the unconscious girl and shouted over the cacophony, "Agios, get to the center, I'll handle these goons!" Agios nodded, his eyes never leaving hers for a moment before he broke into a sprint towards the pulsing epicenter of the ritual. The cultists, now aware of the intrusion, turned on him with renewed ferocity. Their movements were erratic and unpredictable, driven by a force that seemed to warp the very air around them. Mandy set Lila down gently at the tunnel's entrance, her eyes never leaving the frenzied mob. With a fierce battle cry, she charged into the fray, her fists and the knife from her garter flashing in the candlelight. Each strike was precise and calculated, aiming for the cultists' most vulnerable points. One by one, they crumpled to the ground, their eyes clearing as the grip of the dark magic loosened. The room grew colder, the air charged with a static electricity that made the hair on Mandy's arms stand on end. The chanting reached a crescendo, the voices of the cultist blending into a single, horrific drone that seemed to resonate with the very stones of the mill. Agios sprinted to the stone table at the center of the room where the ritual was being performed. The air around the table shimmered and buckled, a sign that the barrier between worlds was dangerously thin. He had to act quickly. Thaddeus Crow stood with his back to Agios, his arms outstretched as he chanted in a language that seemed to twist and corrode the very air. The book in his hand was ancient, its pages yellowed and frayed at the edges. Agios knew that if he didn't stop the ritual now, it would be too late.
With a roar, he leapt onto the table, knocking the tome from Crow's grasp. The book hits the floor with a thud, and the chanting abruptly stops. The room goes quiet, the only sound the heavy breathing of the exhausted combatants and the distant rush of the river. Crow spins around, his eyes alight with fury. He reaches for the knife, but Agios is faster, snatching it from the table. You dare defile the sanctity of the great old one's arrival. He hisses, his voice an unnatural mix of anger and reverence. Agios holds the knife firmly, the blade glinting in the candlelight. "I dare," he says, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hand. "And I'm going to end you right now." Crow laughs, a high-pitched manic sound that sends chills down Mandy's spine. "You think you can stop us?" He gestures to the swirling maelstrom of energy that has begun to coalesce around the table. Nyralothep is already here, and with Lila's soul as a conduit, it will claim this world for its own. Agios doesn't waste any more time on words. He lunges at Crow, the knife flashing through the air. The cult leader is nimble, though, and dances away, his robes fluttering like the wings of a bat. The two men engage in a brutal, desperate dance, each strike and parry a battle of wills as much as it is a clash of steel. Mandy watches from the edge of the room, her heart in her throat. The energy around the table grows stronger, the air crackling with power. She knows she can't just stand there. She has to do something. Her eyes fall on the fallen tome, and she darts towards it. The book is heavy in her hands, the pages sticky with a substance she dares not identify. The text is written in a language she doesn't recognize, but she flips through the pages, searching for any clue on how to reverse the ritual. Her heart races as she reads the incantations, the words feeling alien on her tongue. Suddenly, a page catches her eye, a symbol that matches one of the tattoos on her own body, a symbol of protection she got from her grandmother who had once dabbled in the occult herself. Mandy whispers the incantation, her voice shaking with hope and fear. The symbol on the page begins to glow, and she feels a surge of power, warm and familiar, coursing through her. Her eyes flick back to Agios and Crow, their battle raging on. She sees her chance and takes it, sprinting towards the stone table. The energy around the ritual circle is now a tornado of malevolent force, threatening to consume them all. With a desperate cry, she slams the book down onto the table, the glowing symbol facing upwards. The room seems to hold its breath as the symbol on the page touches the stone. There's a sudden blinding flash of light and the air shudders. The swirling maelstrom of energy stutters, the inhuman voices from the portal screeching in protest. Agios and Crow are thrown apart by an unseen force, landing hard on the ground. The cultists stumble, their eyes clearing of the madness that had once controlled them. They stare in horror at what they've almost allowed to happen.
Mandy's heart races as the light from the book pulses, the symbol on the stone table absorbing its power. The portal begins to shrink, the otherworldly voices diminishing to a whine. The room seems to breathe a sigh of relief, the very air feeling cleaner and less oppressive. Agios pushes himself to his feet, panting heavily. He stumbles over to Mandy, his eyes wide with shock and admiration. How did you?
Mandy holds up a hand, her eyes never leaving the pulsing symbol. Grandma's old magic, she says through gritted teeth, sweat beading on her forehead. It's not enough to just disrupt the ritual. We need to close the portal completely. Agios nods, understanding the gravity of the situation. He scans the room, searching for any clue on how to seal the breach. His gaze falls on a dusty shelf laden with ancient artifacts. Among them, a peculiar amulet catches his eye. A silver disc, etched with the same symbol that now glowed on the stone table. He rushes over, snatches it up, and sprints back to Mandy's side. Together! They hold the amulet over the dwindling portal, their combined wills focusing the power within it. The symbol on the amulet resonates with the one on the table, the air around them vibrating with energy. The cultists cower, watching the spectacle with a mix of awe and terror. Mandy reads the ancient words from the book, her voice steady despite the trembling in her limbs. The symbol on the amulet glows brighter, and the portal begins to shrink. The alien voices wailing in despair. Agios can feel the weight of the amulet increasing. The power within it straining to contain the eldritch force threatening to spill into their world. Keep going! He shouts, his eyes never leaving the pulsing tear in reality. We're almost there! The incantation pours from Mandy's lips, each syllable resonating with the ancient power of the amulet. The symbol on the table pulses in time with her words, drawing in the eldritch energy like a sponge soaking up a dark stain. The air around them crackles with the efforts, and the floor beneath their feet shakes. Agios' arm begins to tremble, the weight of the amulet feeling as if it's increasing with every passing second. But he holds firm, his gaze locked on the dwindling portal. He can see the fear in the cultist's eyes now, the realization of what they've almost unleashed upon their town! Mandy's voice grows stronger, the incantation building to a crescendo. The air in the room seems to vibrate, the very walls of the mill groaning. Under the pressure of the closing rift, the light from the book and the amulet merge into a single blinding beam that pierces the heart of the dark vortex. Suddenly, there's a deafening roar, and the ground beneath them heaves. The cultists scream, their eyes wide with terror, as the floor cracks open, revealing the churning abyss beneath Agios feels the amulet pulse in his hand. The power within, reaching a. critical mass!
monster Mandy! With a final, desperate push, Mandy completes the incantation. The air around them crackles like lightning. And the amulet in Agios' hand grows unbearably hot. With a thunderous boom, the portal slams shut. The last vestiges of other worlds